The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished tile floor. Everything in room 412 felt too clean, too ordered, as if the universe had to compensate for the chaos resting quietly in the hospital bed. Lena's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, each breath regulated by a ventilator whose rhythmic hiss was the only sound beside the occasional beep from her monitors. A tangle of tubes and wires connected her frail body to machines designed to keep her alive, machines that had become more a cage than a salvation. Dr. Alara Miles stood at the foot of the bed, her white coat stark against the pale green walls. She had performed dozens of euthanasia procedures in her career, all legal, all ethical, all devastating. But none had carved into her the way this one did. Lena was 12 years old, small for her age, and impossibly light when Alara had carried her to surgery weeks ago. And now, after every treatment failed, after Lena had slipped further from the world, today was the day her parents had chosen to let her go. They weren't in the room. Alara hadn't asked why. Grief shaped people in unpredictable ways, and she couldn't judge them for wanting distance from the moment their child's heart would stop beating. She hated the phrase assisted death, so neat, so controlled. It did no justice to the truth of what it felt like to end a life, even out of mercy. Nurse Abdi entered quietly, holding the sedative. He was always gentle, his presence like a soft exhale. Vitals stable, he said. As stable as they've been. Alara nodded. Proceed. The nurse moved to Lena's side, brushing a lock of dark hair from the girl's forehead. Her eyelashes fluttered at the touch. Still some reflexes, he murmured. Alara glanced at the chart. The sedation would calm what little nervous activity remained. They were past the point of return, past hope. The girl's body was failing slowly, hour by hour. Still, her expression seemed peaceful, like she was on the edge of a dream she refused to leave. The injection went in with practiced ease. Silence deepened. Alara watched the monitor begin its slow descent, the heartbeats stretching wider apart. She had known this would be hard. She hadn't known it would feel like betrayal. Outside, clouds gathered. The sky, so clear that morning, now darkened to an unnatural gray. Thunder murmured in the distance, low and simmering. The storm wasn't scheduled. Weather patterns had been perfectly mapped for the week. Alara's eyes darted to the window, where something strange stirred on the horizon. Just a shadow, a distortion. Probably her imagination. The first jolt came like an earthquake. The walls shuddered. Ceiling tiles shook in their frames. An emergency siren blared outside the room. Alara froze, adrenaline washing over her in a cold rush. The nurse reached for the emergency comm panel, but before he could speak, the world exploded. The rear wall of the room, solid concrete, steel reinforced, erupted inward in a burst of white dust and splintered debris. Rocks flew like shrapnel, striking equipment, smashing monitors. A howl of wind and something else, something alive, poured into the room. Alara shielded her eyes, stumbling back as the dust cleared. She wasn't breathing. No one was. A creature filled the void where the wall had been. It crouched in the wreckage, wings unfolding with impossible grace. They stretched from one end of the room to the other, vast and membranous, lit with glowing veins of violet light. Its skin was a deep obsidian shimmer, shifting like oil under a moonlit sky. And its eyes burned gold, intelligent and ancient and impossibly aware. The dragon, not a hallucination, not a metaphor. It was here, coiled around the shattered entrance, its body too large for the space, yet somehow it fit. A hot gust of wind, scented with stone and ash, swept through the room as it exhaled. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. The nurse was frozen, eyes wide, mouth open but soundless. The dragon moved forward, slow and deliberate. Its gaze locked on Lena. The girl's heart monitor beeped, once, then twice, then steadied. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was inches from her face. There was no aggression in its posture, no threat, only presence. It studied her, unblinking, as if confirming something only it could see. Lena stirred. Alara nearly screamed. The sedative had been strong. The girl should have slipped further into unconsciousness, not stirred. But there she was, eyelids fluttering open, mouth forming the softest shape. A smile. "Do you see it?" Alara whispered. as if speaking too loud might break whatever miracle had emerged. The dragon's head turned. Slowly, deliberately. Its golden eyes met Alara's. She felt it then, not a voice, but a sensation behind her eyes. A question. A presence asking for understanding. "What are you?" she whispered. The dragon did not speak. It didn't need to. Its gaze shifted back to Lena, and the unspoken message rippled through Alara like a wave. Not her time. The machines that had been failing began to stabilize. The ventilator's hiss smoothed out. The heart monitor's erratic rhythm steadied. Lena's fingers twitched against the blanket. Outside, shouts rang down the hallway. Chaos had erupted across the hospital. Sirens wailed. Personnel screamed orders. A lockdown was likely moments away. But inside the room, time slowed. Alara stepped forward. The nurse tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off. "You came to save her?" she asked, absurdity crumbling before the weight of the moment. The dragon lifted its head slightly and gave what could only be called a nod. The wind ruffled Alara's coat as the beast pulled its wings closer to its body. Despite its size, it moved with a quiet dignity. Lena's eyes opened wider now. She looked directly into the dragon's face and laughed, small, breathy, but undeniably joyful. "Are you my dream?" she asked. The dragon leaned forward, nostrils flaring slightly, then exhaled a puff of warm air that lifted her hair. "No," Alara whispered, answering for it. "You're not dreaming." The girl's gaze found Alara. "Then I don't want to die." Alara's knees buckled slightly. Every principle, every law, every protocol unraveled in that moment. She looked at the sedative drip, at the machines, at the wall that no longer existed. Then back to the girl, who was now stronger than she had been in weeks. "No," Alara said, her voice firm now. "You won't." The dragon backed toward the gaping hole in the wall. Its eyes lingered on Alara, and she understood with a clarity that felt like borrowed insight. This wasn't a beast. It wasn't wild. It had come for a purpose, and its purpose was not complete. More footsteps thundered down the hall. Armed guards. Questions. Containment. The dragon beat its wings once, slow and powerful, and launched into the storm outside. Thunder cracked overhead as it vanished into the clouds, leaving behind only destruction and the stunned breath of those who remained. Alara turned to Lena. The monitors still beeped. Her color was better. Her pulse steady. The impossible had happened. And now, nothing would ever be the same. The hospital descended into a chaos that no emergency drill could prepare for. Sirens echoed through the corridors, lights flashed red in synchronized bursts, and security personnel swept the halls with weapons drawn, though none could articulate what they were searching for. Reports ranged from a terrorist attack to a structural failure. No one was ready to accept what had actually happened. Dr. Alara Miles sat motionless in a nearby debriefing room, her coat smudged with concrete dust, her thoughts tangled in disbelief. She had said little during the preliminary questioning. What could she say? That a dragon, an actual, fireless, intelligent dragon, had emerged from nowhere to stop a sanctioned euthanasia procedure? That it had revived a dying child with a single breath? Even speaking it aloud would make her sound unwell. Across the hospital, in a quarantined intensive care unit, Lena was awake. Monitors continued to track her vitals, but she no longer needed the ventilator. Her lungs moved on their own now, slow but steady. She was weak, still gaunt from weeks of unconscious decline, but the sparkle in her eyes hadn't been there in months. She spoke little and only when prompted, as if overwhelmed by the weight of her return. Her first words after the dragon left had been to ask for her sketchbook. Her second had been, "Is it coming back?" Security footage of the incident was under investigation, though Alara knew much of it would prove inconclusive. The electromagnetic pulse that preceded the dragon's arrival had knocked out power in critical areas. Still, whispers began to spread among the staff, of a winged shadow that moved against the storm, of something enormous that had torn through reinforced concrete without leaving scorch marks or signs of explosives. Alara was summoned to a private meeting that evening, hours after the explosion. The administrator, Michael Lavin, was a man known for his calm under pressure. Tonight, that calm was eroding fast. "I need to know what happened in that room," he said, leaning forward, fingers steepled. No embellishments. No theories. Just facts. She met his eyes. Lena was sedated. Her vitals were crashing. Then, the wall ruptured. A being entered the room. A dragon. It approached her, breathed on her, and her condition stabilized. She is no longer in critical care. He studied her for a moment. You realize how that sounds? I do. Did anyone else see it? Nurse Abdi was present. He's been kept under medical observation since the event. He's not speaking. Michael sat back in his chair. We've quarantined the room. The Department of Defense has already contacted us. They want a full report, and they're sending people. Are they going to take her? They won't say it outright. But yes, they're interested in the girl. Alara's hands curled into fists on her lap. She just started to live again. You can't let them lock her away. I may not have a choice, he said, voice heavy. This is now above all of us. In room 417, Lena stared at the ceiling, fingers clutching her pencil. The sketchbook in her lap was filled with renderings of the creature, each one more detailed than the last. She captured the shimmer of its scales, the flare of its wings, the molten hue of its eyes. None of the doctors could explain how her motor control had returned so quickly. They said she should be months into rehabilitation before regaining that kind of dexterity. And yet, she drew with precision and urgency, as if the act itself was keeping her tethered to something more than life. When Alara visited her the next morning, Lena looked up with a weary smile. You saw it too, didn't you? I did. Then I'm not crazy. No, Alara said, kneeling beside her. You're not. Lena hesitated. It didn't speak, but I heard it. Inside. It was like a feeling, like I knew what it wanted. What did it want? Lena didn't answer immediately. She closed the sketchbook and set it aside. It wanted to stop me from leaving. Because something's coming. Alara's breath caught. What do you mean? There's something broken. Not just in me. In the world. Her eyes narrowed slightly, brow furrowed. And it thinks I can help fix it. Alara stood in stunned silence. The room seemed to grow quieter around them. Later that day, federal agents arrived, suits without names, badges without designations. They took over security, demanded medical records, scanned the scene with strange devices. They avoided questions and offered none of their own beyond those directly related to Lena's condition. Alara refused to leave the girl's side during their examination. She watched with mounting discomfort as they took blood samples, ran scans, and asked Lena to recount the event. I don't remember everything, Lena said calmly. I remember being tired. Then I remember a voice, not with words, just light. It pulled me back. It told me I had to stay. And do what? One of the agents asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I know it's not done. They exchanged glances behind her back. Cold, calculated. When they left, Alara cornered one of them. She's not your test subject. If she's something more than human, the agent said quietly, then she doesn't just belong to you, doctor. She's still a child. Not anymore. Alara felt something snap inside her. She didn't recognize it as courage until much later. At the time, it felt more like fury. Something old and maternal and unyielding. That night, the storm returned. Not on the weather radar. Not in the forecasts. But overhead, clouds gathered again, unnaturally dense, laced with purple lightning. Thunder cracked like 1,000 stone pillars collapsing in unison. Alara had moved Lena to a lower floor under the pretense of infection risk. In truth, she had sensed something. The girl needed to be hidden. When the power failed at 2:17 a.m., backup generators kicked in, but only partially. Emergency lighting sputtered and cast long, flickering shadows down the hallways. Alarms failed. Doors jammed. For a moment, the entire hospital existed in an eerie limbo. And then he returned. Through the Upper East atrium, glass shattered in a cascade of glittering fragments. The dragon descended like a god of midnight, coiling once through the hall before landing with a ground-shaking thud. This time, it did not move slowly. It did not wait for awe or understanding. It came with purpose. Alara heard it before she saw it. Wings slicing air, claws gouging tile. She turned the corner just as it reached the corridor outside Lena's new room. A man in a black suit stood before the door, gun drawn. The dragon's eyes flared gold. The man's weapon melted into his hand before he could aim. Alara stepped between them without thinking. Wait, she cried. She's here. But she's safe. No one's hurting her. The dragon stopped. Just short of her. The heat off its body was staggering, but she held her ground. Her heart hammered in her chest. Please, she whispered. Tell me what this is. Again, no voice. But again, she felt it. a tide of knowing washing over her. She is not yours. She is not theirs. She is chosen. Behind her, Lena appeared in the doorway, barefoot, pale, her eyes glowing faintly in the emergency light. I'm ready, she said softly. The dragon turned, bowed its head, then extended one wing like a sheltering arc. Lena approached and reached out a hand, laying it against the dragon's snout. A warm wind swirled around them. Light shimmered from the girl's touch. In the stillness that followed, something profound settled. The dragon did not fly with wings alone. It carried silence, a silence that muffled alarms, hushed shouts, and rendered the hospital's chaos momentarily still. As Lena stepped into the creature's shadow, the world seemed to pivot on an unseen fulcrum. She paused only once to glance back at Alara, a flicker of doubt in her eyes, quickly masked by a growing resolve. Alara couldn't speak. Her breath was caught in her throat, crushed by the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. She wanted to pull Lena back, to insist the world wasn't ready to take her again, not like this. But she knew better. Lena had been reborn by something greater than medicine or miracle. Her place had changed. The dragon lowered itself, neck coiled and body tense like a bowstring. Lena climbed atop its back, finding steady holds between armored scales that shimmered with ethereal light. No words were exchanged, yet an understanding passed like a current between them. She was going where no one else could follow. They left through the breach in the upper atrium, the hole still jagged with steel and shattered glass. No one dared stop them. Agents and doctors stood alike in frozen awe, as if facing some ancient truth too vast to question. The dragon leapt, wings unfurled, and the girl who had once begged for release vanished into the storm. Alara remained in the empty corridor long after they disappeared. Around her, the lights sputtered back to life. Machines resumed their clicks and beeps, and life attempted to stitch itself back together. But something essential had shifted. The air still pulsed with residual energy. The hospital, for all its sterile order, had become a place touched by myth. Days passed without word. Officials flooded the building. Interrogations, assessments, cover stories. The wall breach was attributed to an unconfirmed explosion. The few who had witnessed the event firsthand were either silenced or reassigned. The footage was confiscated. Alara was placed on administrative leave. She spent her days revisiting the empty room Lena once occupied. She would sit there for hours, watching the wind trace lazy spirals of dust through the fractured window. It wasn't grief that consumed her, it was anticipation. The feeling that Lena's departure was not an ending, but an intermission. Then, one night, it happened again. Not a storm this time, but stillness. Not lightning, but a low-frequency hum that filled the earth itself. A vibration that made her bones resonate, as if some vast machinery beneath the skin of the world had awakened. Alara rose from her chair and stepped into the hall, following instinct more than reason. The hospital was quiet, too quiet. Even the ever-present murmur of machines seemed subdued. And then the lights flickered, not in panic, but in sequence. A pulse moving down the corridor ahead of her, drawing her forward. She reached the research wing, recently sealed off by government orders. The magnetic locks disengaged with a soft click, though she hadn't touched a thing. Inside, she found the room transformed. Where once there were data terminals and whiteboards stood a single object. Lena's sketchbook, resting on a metal table, its cover untouched by dust. With trembling fingers, Alara opened it. The drawings had changed. No longer just the dragon. Now there were landscapes. Vast ruins with glowing spires, cities suspended in air, forests of light. In one sketch, Lena stood atop a cliff, eyes closed, hands raised to a sky filled with strange constellations. And at the end, a message. When it begins, follow the storm. Alara didn't know what it meant, but she knew it was real. She felt it in her blood. Lena had left something behind, not just hope, but direction. In a mountain range half a world away, Lena stood before a gate carved into stone, its surface pulsing with the same hues that danced in the dragon's scales. The creature curled behind her, protective but still. Around them, the land breathed. Trees glowed faintly. The wind whispered in forgotten tongues. And beneath it all, a deep rhythm, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Lena held her hands out, not in command, but in invitation. The gate responded. Light bled from the carvings, etching patterns in the air. Something ancient stirred, She didn't understand everything, only that she had to keep going. The dragon had told her as much in the way only it could. Through dreams, through feeling, through that unshakable pull towards something bigger than herself. She stepped through the gate, not into another land, but another layer. The sky dimmed and expanded. Stars realigned. And suddenly, she saw it. The broken one. Not a monster, not in any traditional sense. It was a thing out of place, like a piece of machinery jammed into the wrong system. It consumed rather than created. It rewrote instead of healed. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't run. She stood before it with a calm that belied her age, a child no longer, but a chosen keeper. The dragon roared behind her, a roar that echoed not through ears but souls. And then, Lena raised her hands. Energy surged from her chest, channeled through something only she could see. Threads of light lanced into the creature, not to destroy, but to bind, to restore. It screamed, not in pain, but in resistance, a final defiance. But the light was patient. And when it was done, the broken one dissolved into air, unraveling like a bad dream forgotten by morning. Lena collapsed to her knees. The dragon approached, nudging her gently. She smiled. "It's beginning," she whispered. Finally, back in her home, Alara stood at the edge of her porch as the wind picked up. The sky glowed faintly purple. She didn't know where the storm would take her, but she would follow it, because Lena was still out there. And the story wasn't over yet.